Hello, hello. We are back. Took a quick week off for a little bit of PTO. But we're back. Jonathan, how are you doing? It's a pleasure to see you again.
I am doing really well, Tristan. It definitely feels good to be back on the air, and absolutely looking forward to this week. How was your time off?
It was good. I traveled to Boston, so since I'm out of Seattle, that was a nice long flight.
Ooh,
Excuse
coast to coast.
me. Yeah, flew to Boston to do Penny Arcade Expo East. Worked as an enforcer. I teach tabletop board games on the night shift from 6:30 to midnight. So picked up a little bit of con cred. Still got some stuff floating around in my chest.
Well, I
I'm
hope you feel
testing.
better.
I'm not positive for COVID.
Yeah, feel better, man. Feel better. I know a couple days at any of those conferences will always send you home with something more than a goodie bag.
Oh yeah. No, it was kind of nuts. You know, it was a really great time. I always enjoy myself when I'm doing that. I get to play board games a ton, but also teach people how to play them. And now I've got like returning customers who remember me and I remember them, and they're like, "Oh, you taught us Azul blah 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 last year. Can you teach us this one, or do you have anything that's similar to this?" And get to catch up on their lives. It's fun. It's like having this giant across the nation, like nationwide kind of like group of friends. Who are all into the same stuff that I am, and all look at me as an expert, which is a nice feeling in my life.
Dude, very, very cool, right? I love the passion that you share in this. And so while you've been gone, right, a lot of crazy stuff has clearly happened in the internet, and we're excited to help cover some of that stuff this week. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we should jump into it.
Cool. Well, this is GPS Live for April 29th, 2022.
2022.
All right, let's you ready to kick off our first one here?
I am ready. Let's go for it.
All right. So this article is very interesting, titled "Researchers Take Over Unpatched Third-Party Antivirus Sandboxes via VirusTotal." Right, and VirusTotal is a name that we're familiar with. Right, this is kind of like the place that you can go to check if something is maybe found to be malicious. Right, it runs it through all these different antivirus programs, but this is a different take on it. I thought this is very clever. Rather than looking if something's malicious, why not see if there's known vulnerabilities in the antivirus programs themselves? Right? Like very interesting stuff's going on here. Like, what were they thinking when we were reading this article? They said that some of these antivirus engines are ran within VirusTotal, but some of them are back at the antivirus companies. Right, like
it's an interesting story, from the perspective of like you said, validating the tools that you're using and stuff like that, but then recognizing that within security itself, you still have to like look at these tools and validate them. And it was I believe, I mean, like, granted, I am not a in-depth security researcher, right? I'm not. I probably wouldn't be able to find this stuff on my own. But looking at it, it seems like they just kind of looked at the internals of how VirusTotal talks back to these different providers, and found a pretty I wouldn't say easy, but a well-known, it seems like, way to exploit that, right? Like,
yeah, it was a known vulnerability in a component often found in a number of tools across the internet. And apparently including antivirus tools too, which is just EXIF tool, right? Reading media context data.
Yeah, just reading the metadata, which is, it makes sense why this would be as an open source tool, right? EXIF tool is an open source utility. So why would you reinvent the wheel, right? If there's an open source version of, we need the ability to read metadata from these files, why build it from the ground up yourself when there's an open source version of it? And it makes sense why you would want to have that, right? The ability of malicious and nefarious people to dive in and use whatever is available to them, right? Like, of course, you want to be able to read the metadata around media files, anything else that comes in, because that could very easily carry a payload that you could exploit, right? Mm-hmm. So you want to be able to do that and be able to say, does this check out against something else, right? So it makes sense why that would be in these tools, but the fact that it is a well-known exploit, and that,
and it's not even the first either. Like,
yeah, it's
this
not the
happened
first
in
time.
GitHub also.
Yeah,
Using exif tool, because like a lot of these other tools, they depend on so many individual libraries and individual other components in open source projects that are outside of their own applications development, right?
yeah, and it's so. I mean, what they did though is they essentially just uploaded a file to VirusTotal, right? And then VirusTotal then sends that back to these AV engines. That file itself then makes use of an exploit inside of exiftool, and then they have remote code execution abilities on machines attached to that, which is huge. Like that, like gaining access to the machines that are controlling your antivirus, like the antivirus that you then in the end use, is
you
a
have access
massive.
to a box at these different companies.
Exactly.
Absolutely
Right.
interesting stuff.
Yeah.
So it was put together by some researchers earlier last year, disclosed to the security teams over at Google and VirusTotal, and it has since been patched. But it definitely gets us thinking about what was going on here, and how even our own applications have so many dependencies, so many libraries, so many components that are open source, that are from other groups and other developers, that we don't have full tracking over, right? And that's, I think it's definitely a growing area. I know our application security practice is very active in this space of not just looking at applications developed within the organization, but also what is brought into that application, whose code are you using, what libraries, what components, all this fun stuff from the outside, because it directly affects you, as we can clearly tell.
Yeah, and it's really important to note that all of this happens too kind of within a like operating as intended framework, right? Which is the fact that like this was these files are being uploaded to VirusTotal. VirusTotal, as intended, was sending them off to these different security companies and AV providers. Those AV providers were executing the code in sandboxes as intended, right? But it's just because that sandbox was built using these tools that they were able to gain access. But once you have that remote code execution ability on those, right, you can flow out from there, and you can also start to manipulate things at the sandbox level itself too, to say like ignore these things. But you could do all kinds of stuff with this, right?
Potentially, right?
So
you could make your new virus not show.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I think that's the, like you were just saying, like the application security and like, hey, are the tools that you're using inside the tool that you're building also secure, and should you be notified of these things? Like that all happens too, just within the framework of it's executing exactly as intended. Like no one ever gets to the end of writing or creating or building the thing that they are building and hits run for the first time and sees a flawless execution, right? That never happens. There's always an error somewhere, but even if that were to happen and everything operates exactly as intended, that does not mean that you are free of the burden of going back and double checking to make sure, did I grab a snippet of code from Stack Exchange that allows something that I didn't account for, right? Did I grab a GitHub open source project that has something in it that hasn't been patched yet?
Exactly. Well,
really
talking about manipulation of things, I think that segues us really well into our next story, which, by the way, I'll have to tell you a story about DEF CON and compiling code and making sure it runs the first time.
Yeah.
We'll leave that for the side channel chat.
Okay.
But this is the next one. And look, I know NFTs have a very special place in all of our hearts these days.
Yep.
But this is an interesting one, right? And it's not necessarily something against the concept of a technology or blockchain or even NFTs themselves. It has to do with hype, right? And so the article is, a thief steals $1 million of Bored Ape Yacht Club, or one of the most popular NFTs right now, with an Instagram hack. But what really goes on here, not just an Instagram hack, this is like one of those account takeovers, right? Like masquerading as an authoritative blue checked account and posting ups and instructions for its viewers to do. And in this case, it was accidentally transfer your priceless NFT to a malicious actor. But it just goes to show there's a lot more in social engineering than just technical hacking.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Like I think looking at this story, it's what I find interesting about it is like one, like you said, yeah, it's just an account takeover. We've all seen this before, right? Like right now, I have a family member whose Instagram account was recently taken over, and it immediately started DMing me, like investor investor tips and like trying to get me to like do stuff. And I was like, okay, this is so clearly not, the person who I know it is. But us, when it's done in a way that's savvy and is taking into account the audience that is consuming that account's information and what that account puts out, it's extremely effective. So the importance of protecting your own accounts and having the layered levels of security that you can around that is really important. And one would think, not to get into anything that's like disparaging, right? But one would think that in a very technology forward area like NFTs, right? Mm-hmm. That the owners of an account like Bored Ape Yacht Club would have tighter control over that, and some of that falls to the social services that they're using, right? How much control are they allowed to have? But the fact that these accounts can still be taken over, you still have to be wary of, like, even coming from official sources that you would normally trust. You have to watch out for this stuff. But then it was like the simplest heist ever, right? They got in, and all they did was say, like, we are doing an airdrop. And for anyone who's not in the kind of crypto space, that means we're going to just be dropping valuable tokens or coins or whatever to your wallet. You just have to connect your wallet. Yeah. And so a bunch of people did. They connected their crypto wallet, their MetaMask wallet to whatever these attackers,
like malicious website that they got everybody to go to.
Yeah, they connected it to this malicious website through that link, and their wallets were just emptied. And I think probably the most painful thing about this is, if you understand crypto and you kind of look at things, because it's all based on the blockchain, you can just see where your stuff lives now. Like, it's not like someone stole the Mona Lisa and it's squirreled away in a bunker somewhere that no one knows about. You can see where it lives. It's on the blockchain. It's written there, like, this is the wallet that now holds your stuff.
Well, from what we're reading here, this individual furthermore went and sold them on platforms like OpenSea, and yes, the accounts associated are now tagged as a malicious actor. Yeah. But we'll see where this goes on the internet. And again, we've seen this multiple times on different social media platforms, even with multi-factor authentication enabled. The ability to do modern SIM swapping and things like that, even still allow these kinds of account takeovers to happen. So definitely something, that tough to combat against, and is going to continue to be a challenge. But I think rather than a political gain, this threat actor went after a financial gain.
Yeah. And there's more to say here too. Like, if you are curious about the crypto market, if you're curious about getting into things, like, make sure that you're doing your research. Like I very barely know, have any goings on in the crypto market or in cryptocurrency and blockchain tech, right, on my own. And I know so many people, like, just through, like, knowing people who are involved in this. I know so many people who get scammed the same kind of way. For something that I said earlier, that is so technology forward and supposed to be kind of the cusp of technology, you would think that people who are deep into it would be much more savvy about this kind of thing. But it just goes to show anyone can get scammed. Anyone can click the wrong link or click the wrong button, and you always have to be kind of on the lookout for it. Not so much a corporate security story, this one, but still really interesting. If you want to look at it from a corporate perspective, I think, just the fact that, like, as a company, if you have social media accounts, your customers are looking at those as official outlets for you. And they view anything that goes up on those accounts pretty much without much discretion. They're going to believe that it's from you and that it must be official. So you have to protect all of you have to consider those extensions of your company, and those are assets that you have to protect.
Brand identity is going to be huge. Potential stock manipulation, right? These are all different targeted attacks that are actively happening.
And
these days, and need to be addressed.
and with all the high level, high level things that have kind of thrust cybersecurity to the forefront of the public mindset recently, there's also been a lot of kind of conversation within the industry around cyber insurance, right? What does it cover? When does it cover it? How do you make sure that you will get coverage if something happens? This is probably something that you might not be thinking about, but if something goes wrong at your organization because social accounts or these extraneous accounts that you had weren't protected well enough, you need to be thinking about what kind of liability are you opening yourself up to, and is that going to impact whether you can recover from these incidents in the ways that you feel that you can.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on a personal note, as somebody who clicks everything, not really, please don't send me anything malicious. I think this kind of segues us into our last story of this week, involving data safety for Android apps, right? And this is one of those other things where, for the understanding the technical implications of your actions, downloading all of those apps on your phones and on your devices and not fully understanding who here reads the T&Cs. I'm just saying. That's kind of a thing that we still haven't gotten through to people yet. But in this article titled Google Starts Rolling Out Play Store Data Safety Section for Android Apps, I think kudos, to the Play Store for making this information as transparent as possible, right? What kind of data are these apps collecting, and why are they collecting it? And so the article goes into talking about how there is a whole section now on collected data, data safety, data shared, what and why, including stuff like personal information and location information, right in the Play Store before you download the app, not during, not after.
Not buried in like an expandable menu that you have to go to. Yeah, it's just right there.
Bringing a lot more of this transparency to the top, I think, is super important. I mean, like, dude, we all have a fair share of apps on our phone that we probably don't fully know what they're doing.
Yep. Yeah, it's I think back to the early days of phone apps, right? And the ways that smartphones were constructed, right? Like, and their operating systems were built. The very early,
everything was like accessible.
Everything's accessible, right? That's the very early days. Like, you just downloaded an app and it just had access, right? And then they started segmenting things and delineating things and saying, like, well, you have to access these certain things for XYZ. And then it became, we're going to notify people, hey, do you want to give this app permission to access blah, blah, blah. But the ways those permissions were divvied up was super confusing back then, right? Like,
always click allow to get it out of the way.
Exactly. Like, if you had a phone, or if you had an app, like, you could download a flashlight app, and it would ask for permission to control phone operations, like your dialer and access to your contacts and stuff, because something that it needed was just squirreled away in that hunk of permissions. Like, there was no granularity to it.
Why did my flashlight need to send a text message?
Exactly. It didn't. It just needed access to some function somewhere within that stack. Unless it was malicious and it was doing those things, but you're kind of in the dark. And so we've been progressing over time. Apple's been at the forefront of a lot of privacy control and awareness with their users. I think Android has actually done a pretty good job as well, keeping up with that. I'm an Android user myself. So I think they've done a pretty good job at keeping up with that as well, and branching out into some of their own areas. There's always like the joke that, when Apple announces a brand new groundbreaking feature, by the time they've broken through the ground, there's already a bunker of Android users below it, right? Like they've already had it for a while. But, it's this kind of back and forth. But what I really love about this most is that control of your data, your personal information, because it is your information, right?
Yeah. You're the product, right?
Right. Well, it's becoming more and more important these days, like, that you have control of that. And while this isn't giving you control per se of, hey, this developer is collecting this information about you so you can go tell them what to do with it, what it is doing is it's giving visibility and awareness to the user, so that they can, quote unquote, vote with their wallet. And say, you know what, I'm not going to download this game because I don't want it tracking my location and then selling that, or just tracking my location at all.
Exactly. It's not just location. So some of the data types that are mentioned, right? We're
Mhm.
talking about stuff like location, personal information, financial information,
Yeah.
health and fitness, messaging, phone, video, audio, files, calendar,
So
activities,
much
web
stuff.
browser performance, device and other identifiers that are unique,
Yeah.
right? And they say that they can tag these things with purposes. So functionality, analytics, developer communications. You can blatantly say this is for advertising and marketing purposes. Fraud prevention is another one, right? And so there's a reasonable expectation that they have a deadline, July 20th of this year. All apps are required to have completed an accurate data safety form that
Yep.
discloses this stuff. There's still going to be games. I mean, there's still going to
Yeah.
be people, walking that line. And I hope that the Play Store, finds these apps and brings them out and highlights that they are not being truthful and honest with what their data requests are. But hey, I think this is absolutely, like you said, a step in the right direction.
Yep.
So
And I think it's also aside from just announcing or putting up as you download the app or before you download the app, like, hey, here's what it's going to access and what it's saying it's accessing that for. There's also two really important pieces in there that don't just fall under the like what is it accessing, but the section can also include information on if the application and the developer have committed to following the Google Play Family policy
okay.
to protect children within the app store, so make sure that they're not downloading stuff that has content in it that they shouldn't be gaining access to, or things that are going to take advantage of the fact that it's a child on the other end of that
Yeah.
screen. So it'll include information on whether they've actually committed to following that, and then whether they've validated their security practices against a global standard. So specifically the MASVS, have they validated against this? And that's really important when you are forking over your data, like your financial info and your files and your pictures. Like,
Yeah.
have they actually followed security practices? I think that's really great. I love the fact that this is a new feature,
Yeah.
and to tie it back again to the more corporate mindset, right? This is just the kind of stuff that you need to be thinking about from the bring your own device perspective, right? Are the devices that people are bringing in falling within good company policy? Are you utilizing the features like the ones that Google has with Android that allow you to segregate all of the data from your company on that phone so that you can wipe that
Mm-hmm.
section of memory if you need to?
That
Um,
MDM, right? That we
yeah,
all love on our devices.
yeah, I absolutely love it. It's great.
Well, I mean, you know what? As we kind of close up here for the
Yep.
day, and I think this is an absolutely successful live stream week. If you think security is important as much as we do, that's what we're here for. Every week, we'll be talking about some fun stuff going on during the week,
Yeah.
and promoting some of the really cool stuff we do here at GuidePoint. And we'd love to hear from you. Right? In this live feature, you have the ability to send over comments, along with the fact that you can reach out to either of us directly here or GuidePoint in general.
Yeah.
So
we would love to get feedback on this, and also just if you're watching this live and you're throwing comments in there, we can respond to you directly. So didn't get too much of that this time, but that's a-okay. It's fine. It's the first one back, baby. It's we're coming back from a week-long hiatus. So
with that,
so thank you so much, Jonathan, for kicking it with me for a couple of minutes and talking about a couple interesting stories. And thank you so much for joining us. If you're watching, really appreciate you being here. Like Jonathan said, we will be back. Same bat time, same bat channel next week. So that is for Pacific time. If you're like me, that is 10:30. We'll be starting, and then math 1:30 for East Coast. If you're in between those two, I'm sure you can figure it out. That being said, for GuidePoint Security, I have been and will continue to be Tristan Morris.
And I am Jonathan Singer.
And we cannot wait to talk with you guys next week. And with that, we will leave you.